If you care about your car's performance, you should know about bump stops because they do more than you think. Bump stops are usually a piece of rubber inside of your shock tower that engage when your suspension compresses by a certain amount. And most people know this as just a way of preventing your car from bottoming out. But it's not just about bottoming out. Bump stops basically act as a secondary spring at a certain point in your suspension travel that you add on to your normal spring rate. And you're probably thinking, oh, this doesn't matter because I'm never going to hit my bump stops unless I fall from the sky in my car. Well, that's actually not true. Apparently you hit bump stops a lot more than you think. Most OEM cars actually engage them pretty early when you slam on the brakes, and this prevents the car from nosediving too much. And likewise if you have enough power and you hit the gas. But where it gets really interesting is that you're probably also engaging them when you're in a hard turn and your car rolls to the outside. Your outside suspension is probably hitting those bump stops. So this matters a lot because bump stops have a spring rate, just like the normal springs on your car that you add to your springs. So you have to really consider the spring rate in your front to rear to adjust for your oversteery, understeery balance of the car. So when it comes to mid-turn, if your car is engaging the bump stops, it's not so much your spring rates that matter anymore on your car. It's really the bump stop rates that determine your handling. So let's say you had 10K springs in the front and the rear of your car and you had equal motion ratios for the purpose of this video, but you have a front bump stop that's 80K and you have a rear bump stop that's 50K. Well, now you have a much stiffer front when you're in the middle of a turn, and that means your car is going to understeer a lot more than it would if you weren't engaging those bump stops. And you might start thinking, oh, I need to adjust my spring rates now because I'm just understeering too much. Well, if you're engaging those bump stops, it's not really the spring rates, it's the bump stop rates that you have to be adjusting. But you could also just be adjusting the bump stop position, so basically how far into the suspension travel the bump stops engage. So you could add some kind of shim, like a plate, under the top hat to push the bump stop even lower, or add a packer, which is like another bump stop right on top of it, and this would make them engage earlier. Or you can just replace the bump stop with a different kind that has a different rate. Now, most OEM cars do set up their bump stops such that the front is a lot stiffer than the rear. That way, if you're in a maximum turning situation, they don't want OEM cars to be spinning out, having oversteering properties. They want you to be able to understeer so you can plow and go straight. That's just general OEM car safety. But when it comes to aftermarket suspension, this might not be the case. But yeah, bump stops are really important. If you're designing aftermarket suspension as well, you want to make sure that when your car is in mid-turn, you're not constantly like hitting on and off the bump stops. You either want to be on them or not on them. That way you're not constantly fluctuating spring rate on that suspension tower. And you also might want to set up your bump stop position for the purpose of not having your tire contact anything on your car. Like if you're lowered, you probably want to set it to a point where your tire is not hitting your fenders or your wheel well. And also keep in mind that bump stops are usually progressive, so the more they compress, the higher their spring rate actually gets. So yeah, bump stops are really important. We actually realized how big of an issue this was when we were designing the RX-7 tuned for Assetto Corsa. The car was having issues with bump stops, and once we adjusted the bump stop rates and positions, the car handled incredibly different, so much better.